Imagine waking up every day in a house filled with garbage, mold, and human waste. Imagine being so hungry that a single loaf of bread has to last you an entire week. Imagine being so isolated that you haven't stepped outside in years. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This is the real-life story of 3 children, 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and 12-year-old, who were abandoned by their own mother, Kelli Marie Bryant, in a small house on Lydia Lane in Pontiac, Michigan. For years, they were left to fend for themselves in conditions so horrifying, even the most hardened investigators were left speechless. By the end of this video, you'll hear how these children survived on nothing but a loaf of bread a week. You'll learn how one of them hadn't stepped outside in years, and how they were discovered in a house so filthy, it took a hazmat team to process the scene. This is a story of neglect, survival, and the resilience of 3 siblings who endured the unthinkable. The house on Lydia Lane looked like any other home in the quiet neighborhood of Pontiac, Michigan. But inside, it was a different world. When deputies arrived for a welfare check on February 14, 2024, they were met with a scene they would never forget. Garbage was piled 4 feet high in some rooms. Mold covered the walls. The toilet was overflowing, and feces were found in the bathtub. The stench was so strong, it made their eyes water. Inside, they found 3 children, a 15-year-old boy, 13-year-old girl, and 12-year-old girl. The girls had locked themselves in the bathroom, terrified of the outside world. The boy told deputies their mother, Kelli Marie Bryant, had abandoned them years ago. For years, these children had been left alone in this house of horrors. They survived on weekly drop-offs of prepared food left on the front porch. The last time their mother left hygiene items was in 2020, garbage bags, gloves, and Febreze. They hadn't attended school since being abandoned and were removed from enrollment after failing to show up at a new school. This is the story of how 3 siblings endured unimaginable neglect, how they were discovered, and how their lives changed forever. Welcome to True Crime Story Network. A huge thank you to my viewers, especially my subscribers, for your support as we continue to improve and bring you both well-known and untold true crime stories. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, take a moment to subscribe and stay updated. Now, let's get into the details of what really happened. It all began with a phone call. On February 14, 2024, the landlord of a small house on Lydia Lane in Pontiac, Michigan, dialed the authorities. He hadn't seen or heard from the tenant, Kelli Marie Bryant, since December. The last rent payment had been made in October. Something felt wrong. The landlord had tried to reach Bryant multiple times, but his calls went unanswered. The house, once a quiet rental property, now seemed eerily silent. Concerned for the safety of anyone who might still be inside, he decided to call for a welfare check. When deputies arrived, they approached the house with caution. From the outside, it looked like any other home in the neighborhood. But as they got closer, they noticed something unusual. The windows were covered, and there was an overwhelming smell coming from inside. Deputies knocked on the door, but there was no answer. They called out, but only silence greeted them. With no other choice, they entered the home. What they found inside would haunt them for years to come. The moment deputies stepped inside, they were hit by a wall of stench so strong, it made their eyes water. The air was thick with the smell of rotting garbage, mold, and human waste. The living room was unrecognizable. Garbage was piled 4 feet high, covering the floor and spilling onto the furniture. Mold crept up the walls, spreading like a dark, silent intruder. The kitchen was no better, rotting food filled the sink, and the counters were buried under layers of trash. But the worst was yet to come. As deputies moved further into the house, they found the bathroom. The toilet was overflowing, and feces were smeared across the floor and walls. The bathtub was filled with waste, and the smell was unbearable. It was clear that no one had cleaned this house in years. But the question remained, was anyone still living here? As deputies searched the house, they heard a faint noise coming from the bathroom. They knocked on the door and called out, but there was no response. Finally, They announced themselves and asked whoever was inside to open the door. After a moment of silence, the door slowly creaked open. Inside, they found two young girls, 13-year-old and 12-year-old. The girls were terrified, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. They had locked themselves in the bathroom, unsure of who was entering their home. In another room, deputies found a 15-year-old boy. He was sitting on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by garbage. His clothes were soiled, and his hair was matted. When deputies asked him what was going on, he told them the truth: their mother, Kelli Marie Bryant, had abandoned them years ago. For years, these three siblings had been living alone in this house of horrors. They survived on weekly drop-offs of prepared food left on the front porch. The last time their mother had left hygiene items was in 2020, garbage bags, gloves, and Febreze. The children were malnourished, scared, and in desperate need of help. Deputies quickly called for medical assistance and child protective services. As they waited for help to arrive, they tried to comfort the children, but the damage had already been done. This was not just a case of neglect. It was a tragedy that had been unfolding in silence for years, hidden behind the closed doors of a small house on Lydia Lane. The story of how these children ended up living in such horrific conditions begins in 2020. That's when their mother, Kelli Marie Bryant, made the decision to leave them alone in the house on Lydia Lane. At first, it's unclear why Bryant left. Some say she was struggling with personal issues, while others believe she simply didn't want the responsibility of raising three children. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: three young siblings were left to fend for themselves in a house that would soon become a prison. For years, the children survived on the bare minimum. Every week, someone, whether it was Bryant herself or a delivery driver, would drop off prepared food on the front porch. This food was often just enough to keep them alive: a loaf of bread, some canned goods, or pre-packaged meals. The last time Bryant left any hygiene items was in 2020. She dropped off garbage bags, gloves, and a can of Febreze. After that, the children were on their own. The boy took on the role of caretaker for his younger sisters. He slept on a mattress on the floor, while the girls slept on pizza boxes. They hadn't attended school since being abandoned and were removed from enrollment after failing to show up at a new school. Their days were spent in isolation, with no one to turn to and no way to escape. They watched TV, played games, and tried to make the best of a situation that was anything but normal. But as the months turned into years, the house became more and more unlivable. Garbage piled up, mold spread across the walls, and the smell of human waste filled the air. The children were trapped in a nightmare, with no end in sight. The isolation these children endured is almost impossible to comprehend. For years, they were cut off from the outside world, with no contact with friends, family, or even their own mother. The girls hadn't been outside the house in years. They spent their days locked inside, too scared to leave. The boy had only ventured outside twice, once to feel the grass and another time to check the mail. For the boy, those brief moments outside were a rare glimpse of freedom. He later told deputies that he just wanted to feel the grass under his feet, to remember what it was like to be outside. But those moments were fleeting. Most of the time, the children were trapped inside the house, surrounded by garbage and filth. They had no access to clean clothes, no way to bathe, and no one to help them. The emotional toll of their isolation was evident. The children were scared, malnourished, and in desperate need of help. But with no one to turn to, they had no choice but to endure. As the years passed, the house on Lydia Lane became more than just a home, it became a prison. The children were trapped in a cycle of neglect and abuse, with no way to escape. The discovery of the children in the house on Lydia Lane sent shockwaves through the community. But the question on everyone's mind was, where was their mother, Kelli Marie Bryant? Authorities quickly launched an investigation to locate Bryant. They discovered that she had been living elsewhere, leaving her children behind in the garbage-filled home. On February 19, 2024, Bryant was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree child abuse. First-degree child abuse is a serious charge in Michigan, carrying a potential sentence of up to life in prison. Prosecutors made it clear that they intended to pursue the maximum penalty. They also announced plans to file a petition to terminate Bryant's parental rights, ensuring that she would never have custody of her children again. Bryant's arrest was a turning point in the case. For years, she had left her children to suffer in silence. Now, she would have to face the consequences of her actions. But the story doesn't end with Bryant's arrest. To fully understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to look at the role of the children's father, and why he wasn't able to help them sooner. The children's father had been absent from their lives for years. He had been incarcerated, leaving Bryant as the sole caregiver for their 3 children. But when he was released from prison, he tried to reconnect with his kids. In 2022, the father filed for visitation rights in court. He wanted to see his children and be a part of their lives. An agreement was reached, but Bryant allegedly refused to let him see the children. It's unclear why Bryant kept the children from their father. Some believe she was trying to maintain control over them, while others think she was hiding the conditions they were living in. Whatever the reason, the result was the same: the children remained isolated, with no one to help them. The father's attempts to see his children were just one piece of the puzzle. But they highlight the complexity of this case, and the many missed opportunities to save these children from their nightmare. As the legal proceedings against Bryant continue, one thing is clear: this is a story of neglect, betrayal, and the resilience of 3 siblings who endured the unthinkable. After the children were discovered in the house on Lydia Lane, their lives changed forever. Deputies immediately called for medical assistance, and the children were rushed to the hospital for evaluation. The doctors were shocked by what they saw. The children were malnourished, dehydrated, and in desperate need of medical care. Their hair was matted, their clothes were soiled, and their toenails were so long it made walking difficult. But the physical scars were only part of the story. The emotional toll of their ordeal was evident. The children were scared, withdrawn, and unsure of what would happen next. Child Protective Services stepped in to ensure the children's safety. They were placed in the custody of a relative, someone who could provide them with the care and support they so desperately needed. The community also rallied around the children. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office started collecting donations to help them rebuild their lives. Clothes, toys, and other essentials poured in from people who were moved by their story. For the first time in years, the children had hope. They were safe, they were cared for, and they were no longer alone. The discovery of the children in the house on Lydia Lane sent shockwaves through the community. People were horrified by the conditions they had been living in and outraged that no one had intervened sooner. Sheriff Michael Bouchard called this case one of the worst and longest-running he's seen in his career. He praised the deputies who responded to the welfare check, saying their quick actions saved the children's lives. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald also spoke out, describing the living conditions as unspeakably horrific. She vowed to pursue justice for the children, ensuring that Kelli Marie Bryant would be held accountable for her actions. The case sparked a broader conversation about child welfare and the importance of community awareness. Many wondered how such a tragedy could happen in plain sight, and what could be done to prevent it from happening again. This case is a stark reminder of the importance of community awareness. It shows us how easily tragedy can unfold behind closed doors, hidden from the world. The story of these 3 children is one of unimaginable neglect, but also one of survival and resilience. For years, they endured conditions that no child should ever face. They were abandoned, isolated, and left to fend for themselves in a home filled with filth and despair. Yet, despite everything, they survived. Their strength is a testament to the human spirit, but it's also a call to action for all of us. As we reflect on this case, let's remember the importance of looking out for one another. If you ever suspect that a child is in danger, don't hesitate to speak up. Your voice could save a life. This story is also a reminder of the power of community. When these children were finally discovered, people came together to help them rebuild their lives. Donations poured in, and the outpouring of support showed that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. But the work doesn't end here. We must continue to advocate for children's safety and well-being. We must ensure that no child ever has to endure what these three siblings went through. If this story has impacted you, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps spread awareness and ensures that stories like this are not forgotten. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We cover true crime stories from around the world, shedding light on the darkest corners of human behavior to inspire change and justice. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe and aware. Until next time.